Today I will be showing you how to work with and add this easy dialogue system to your game. I suggest trying this system before going out and spending $250 on a different one. First, let's create an object called parNPC. This will be the parent to all of our NPCs. We will set up the object to hold all of our dialogue. Let's create some variables for talking to the NPC first. The variable PID is very important as it will dictate which dialogue it will load. Next, let's set up an alarm for the NPC that will load in all of its text. Now let's create some extra variables for the NPC. These will store the face sprite and the name of the NPC. Next, we will create the 2D lists that will store all of the text for us. The variables on0 and on1 are used for determining where the user is in the dialogue tree. The checklist is used for jumping in between different dialogue trees. Now let's load in the dialogue. I am just going to import all of the scripts needed for the system to work. Now I will add the collision detection with the player so that the dialogue will pop up when you touch the NPC. Next I will create the player object and add some simple movement code. Now that we have the collision in, and the player programmed, we can draw the dialogue box. Most of this code is self-explanatory, and can be found in the example provided in the description. Lines 65 to 108 do the majority of the heavy lifting. They are what draw the different options and the continue button for the dialogue box. Now that we got that done, let's create our first NPC. The code for the NPC will be simple because most of the work is done in the parent object. I will name him Bob and make him a face sprite. Finally, I will assign him the PID of 0. Since his PID is 0, he will load the 0.txt file that we will be putting in the included files. Now let's work with the included editor. I am going to click anywhere within the work area to bring a pop-up display with all of the different node options. I want the character to introduce himself, so I am going to pick the text node out of the 4 options. Now, I want my character to offer you some ice cream, so I will drag out from the first text node I created and pick the switch node. From there, I can drag out 2 check nodes that will tell the dialogue system where to go. Notice how the numbers within the check nodes correspond to the numbers found on the switch node. Now that the player has been given a choice, we should create the possible outcomes. I will create 2 more text nodes and connect them to their corresponding check nodes. Now, I want to make it so that the NPC ends the conversation with the player after he has picked one of these 2 options. I can achieve this by attaching a simple script at the end of each text node. I am going to call the script named showChat. The script will toggle off the chat so that the NPC is no longer speaking with the player. I am also going to call a script that will give the player the ice cream. I will name it script give ice cream. I also want to loop back to the switch node so you can get an infinite amount of ice cream from this NPC. I can do this by connecting the last scripts to the switch node. To make it easier to see where everything is pointing to, you can toggle the option fancy lines found in the options drop-down menu. Now I will save my project, and test it. It seems to work in the editor, so let's get back to the game project. I will then create the script in my game so it will work when we are done. For now, I will just make it simply show a message. Now let's export the dialogue and add it into our included files. Now we need to create a controller object. This object will store the current quest states for us. Then I will create a room for our NPC and player. Next I will create a font called FNT Chat. One last thing that we need to do is set up the GUI for the dialog box. Finally, our NPC is complete and is ready to serve an infinite amount of ice cream to anyone who asks. I hope that this tutorial was helpful to anyone who wants to create their very own branching dialogue system. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments or in the forum link posted below. Next, I will edit the example. Hello there. In this tutorial I will be showing you how to modify this easy dialogue system to suit anyone's needs. First, let's work off of the example that is provided in the description. Feel free to follow along. You will also need the program that is also provided in the description. The program is what we will be using to create the complex dialogue structure. Here you can see the beginning of the conversation. I want to make it so that the player can respond to whatever the NPC is saying. We can accomplish this by creating a script that will be attached to the end of each text node. I make a script called SCR Change Chat. We will be manually adding this script into the example later. It accepts one argument. This argument is the name of the NPC that it will change the picture to. I then change the wording of the dialogue so it sounds more natural and then save my project. To make sure it is working, I test the dialogue. The editor should complain about an unknown script. That is fine, as we will add it later. I then re-export my project to the example. Now let's go to the example project and make the script so that it will work with our game. This is the final script. Note that I needed to make 2 extra variables in the NPCs to permanently store their sprite and name, as we would be changing them in the script and it would be impossible to revert those changes later. Now let's create some more branching dialogue so it seems like our NPC has more depth to its character. Right here seems like a good place to add a user choice. Let's start by disconnecting the nodes and adding a switch node in between them. Remember to connect the switch node to check nodes as they will determine where your dialogue goes to next. Now let's give the player some meaningless options to make them feel like they made a difference in the game. Now I am just testing it to make sure it works and then exporting it again to the example.